Hey, this is horror author Philip Fracassi, and you're listening to the Fright Lab.
Welcome to the Fright Lab. I'm Lucas Yoakum, and as always, we are joined by co-host and producer extraordinaire Joseph Wren. But tonight, siblings, we have an extra special guest. Joining us is Philip Fracassi. He is a USA Today best-selling author as well as a Bram Stoker Award winner. Most recently, a pair of his short stories have been adapted for the screen and will be hitting theaters sometime in the future. I would love to say soon, but you know how production goes. So, Mr. Philip Fracassi, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm gonna open up with an apology for correcting you, but I'm a Bram Stoker Award nominee.
Oh, okay.
I've never actually won the Bram Stoker Award, so I don't want to take credit for something I didn't do. But I am a USA Today bestseller, so I'll take credit for that.
Hey, okay, fair enough. You know, that's not the worst correction I've ever received, so I'll take that happily.
Probably good to get that one.
My name. But you pronounce my name perfectly, so that's why it really matters.
Probably good to get that correction out of the way, because you do not want Pinhead showing up going, I do not see any winners of any awards in this house.
Which would be us. We're the guys who haven't won anything yet. So, right out the gate, anytime I'm talking to somebody who is, shall we say, up to their gills in horror, I want to ask a single question, and I've asked plenty of our guests this before. Why horror? Was there a particular piece of media, a book or a movie that you engaged with, or just an event that made you go, yes, I've found my genre?
I think it's just the way horror writers are wired, just like science fiction writers are probably wired a certain way. I think it's something you're sort of born with. I started writing stories when I was in fifth grade, and I was writing creative writing stories, and that was kind of what got me started. And I remember my first story was horror, and I was not I don't think at that time I was reading a lot of horror, but so I think you just gravitate toward things. I gravitated toward creature features. I gravitated toward, I watched the horror movies when I was a little kid. I got into Stephen King when I was in my early teens. And so I think it's just, for whatever reason, I wasn't really, I was a suburban, I was raised in suburban Detroit. Had a happy normal childhood. I don't think, my parents and siblings are all grew up, in very normal circumstances. So none of them, I'm the youngest of six, none of my siblings are into horror or even into reading or writing, or, they're lawyers and teachers and things like that. And so for whatever reason, I think I'm just wired. I will say that there was a particular moment that I do recall when I was, I don't know how old I was, but I was watching one of my black and white horror movies that I used to watch on Channel 50 in Detroit. And it was The Fly. It was the original Fly.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was at the end of the original Fly, there's a moment where the scientist has tried to reverse the transformation, and instead what he does is he puts his human head on the fly body. Right.
Yep,
and there's a scene where the woman who's his love interest, I believe, she hears him and he's going, help me. Right. And she looks down, she sees him stuck in the web, and the spider's crawling toward him, and he's like, no. And then she breaks the whole web with a rock, I believe. And that moment has always stuck with me, as I think the moment I decided that I wanted to write horror fiction, because there's something about the humanity of that moment and the horror of that moment. This mutated human being stricken and desperate and crying out for help while this monster is coming to eat it, and then tragically being crushed between this rock from his human love interest. I don't know. There's something about that moment that has always stuck with me, and I think I've carried it over into my work, where it's kind of this very human sense of kind of horror. And anyway, but I will say that moment was, I would think, pivotal in my early development.
I'm glad you brought up The Fly, because one, the original Fly, I believe that's Vincent Price, actually. very seminal piece of horror from that era. Also, the 1980s reiteration from David Cronenberg, body horror, very, very wet film, a very disgustingly damp film. When I was reading some of your work to kind of get, I don't know, up to speed on what it is you're doing, I became very aware of this kind of strain of a particular type of Cronenbergian horror, and to wit, I wish to specify. So in Alter, your short story Alter, which I believe is in Behold the Void, you talk really candidly about like childhood experiences. And one of the ones that struck me, the truly Cronenbergian horror moment, is navigating a men's locker room at a swimming pool. It's a very particular type of disgust, I feel, because not only could I smell the locker room, I could kind of taste it. That kind of chlorine and sweat and old towels taste of the air.
It is never clean.
You never feel clean after that. But, also along with that, you're kind of navigating like sibling relationships and the like. It's a very powerful thing to evoke, not just the terror of that story, which I don't want to ruin it for anyone, because I really do want my audience to go read your books. They are really good. But also it takes a very special power to be like, oh yeah, and here is the smell and taste of a men's locker room at a swimming pool in the 90s. Like, what do you think the secret to that kind of evocative literary power is? Is it just swinging for the fences with vocabulary, or what is it that you're aiming at for that?
I do think a lot of it has to do with the vocabulary, for the vocabulary you put it, the prose, the way you write something. Absolutely. I mean, I learned, when I started writing genre fiction, which was only about 10 years ago. So before that, I was writing what I would call non-genre or literary fiction. It just wasn't really horror, wasn't supernatural.
Yeah.
But I read one of the things that spurred me into writing genre fiction was I read an author named Laird Barron, who's kind of a generational talent, one of the most respected horror writers out there today, and he's written several books, but in particular, I read his book of short stories called "The Beautiful Thing That Awaits Us All," and I was blown away as an avid reader and writer. I mean, up to that point, it wasn't like I'd been writing. I'd written 3 novels. I'd probably written 100 short stories, none of which ever got published. And I realized reading Laird's work, the power of what you can do with prose, how he could create menace and dread, not by what was happening in the story, but just by the way he was writing the story. And he and I have talked a lot about that. He ended up becoming like a mentor and a good friend of mine. And he and I talked a lot about how to develop prose, how to thicken it, how to make it more visceral, and we talked about a lot of poets that we both have read. And so it's all very deliberate, and it's amazing what you can do with word choice. It's amazing what you can evoke in someone's head and heart with word choices and structure and pacing. These are all definitely things that I think a lot about when I'm writing. And when I want to get across a certain mood, or to your point, a certain atmosphere, or if I want you to smell it, if I want you to taste it, those are things that I work really hard at. And it changes story by story, book by book. So I've talked about this a lot in the past. Whenever I sit down to write something, the first thing I think about is, how do I want to tell this particular story? Is it a thriller? Is it dense horror? Like, is it atmospheric? Is it what's the tone? What's the pacing? What kind of language do I want to use? Do I want to write it in like a noir style? Do I want to write it in a contemporary style? Do I want to write it first person or third person? Do I want to alternate? And why do I want to alternate, between perspectives? So all that stuff comes into play. And so with Alter in particular, it was very important to me that the reader be propelled back to their childhood and think about those senses and sounds and smells and taste and that we all experience in our childhood. And so it was very important for me to establish that at the beginning of that story, so that once the story kind of takes off, you feel like you're there. and you feel like you're experiencing it firsthand. So thank you it's a compliment. So thank you for the compliment, but also, yeah, definitely very much purposeful and definitely very much done in that particular instance, very much done with prose. And it's not prose that if you were to reread it from a scholastic perspective and like really want to study it and analyze it, you would be able to dissect how I did it. But I think when you're just casually reading, you probably don't realize that you're feeling a certain sort of dread building and you don't really know why, because I'm not describing anything particularly scary, but you're still feeling that way. So that's something that's a tool in a lot of horror writers' toolboxes and that are used to kind of develop that sense of dread or even pending dread are definitely things that I use and I'm very particular about.
Either of you may correct me if I'm misattributing this quote, but I think it was Stephen King who said, "Create worlds, don't create characters." The version of that I was taught was trying to understand why books have a different type of detail than, say, a film. A book, you don't have the advantage of the visuals. So you as the author have to write as many details as you can without filling in too many blanks. And one of my professors once said, your story is not done. Your characters are not yet completed. Your emotion is not yet present until it hurts. And when Lucas mentioned alter, when you get into the details of not just the room itself, now somebody that's been in a men's locker room can probably fill in that visual, and as an engineer or as an impatient observer, I want to see what's happening next. But no, you're going to make me sit here and you're going to describe every sound, every smell, every taste, as Lucas said, to the point where now you're feeling it and it becomes a visceral experience. How do you prioritize that kind of detail or those details in the overall story versus something for TV or for film where it ultimately becomes set dressing and has to be told a different way, either with lighting or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think, it's funny you said the advantage of visualization. I would call it a disadvantage of visualization, because when I can play with your imagination, when I can let the reader fill in the blanks, so to speak, the reader's always going to create a more terrifying image than I can as a writer. To your point, I can explain it till my fingers fall off, and get in the detail of like what a monster looks like or what this is. But I think that, so there's a balance to your point about what, I'm basically my job is to put you there, and then once you're there, I can kind of loosen up a little bit and I can start like having things happen to you, and you're going to do a lot of the filling in the blanks. I've had Alter in particular. There is a very traumatic scene in that story that I purposely wrote in a way that was essentially, to use a movie term, off screen, off camera, because I didn't want it to be gratuitous in any way. And I didn't think I needed to have that. And what's most interesting to me, and it's an assault scene, and what's most interesting to me about that story and the response to that story is how many people came at me with these, you can go on Goodreads and look at it yourself, with these lurid, descriptive, totally not in my story ideas about what happened in that scene. And I'm like, I never said that. Like, that's all you. That's you filling in the blank. Like I won't go into it, but there were some crazy things, and it was actually, it didn't bother me, but I found it very interesting. Like that there were people saying like, oh, like this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. And what an awful book, what an awful story, what an awful person this author is. And I'm like, none of that stuff is actually in the story. Like that's all you conjuring your own ideas with me giving you like this little acorn of thought. So, but to answer your question, I think is to talk about, how do you choose? I think it's case by case. And I'll go back to kind of what I just said, but to kind of give you more examples. So I wrote a novel, for example, called Serafina, which came out recently. And Serafina is set in it's a Civil War era novel. It's set, it's about three brothers who go AWOL from a battle of Shiloh, and they had to walk back to Natchez, Mississippi. And it's all about this, a lot of the book is about them trying to get home and walking through this wilderness, because at the time, and this undeveloped country. And that book it's very paced. It's very descriptive. I spent a lot of time talking about, the flowers and the food and the weather and the atmosphere and the itchy clothes and the feel and like the sounds of their footsteps. And a lot of it was really about creating an atmosphere, because that was kind of the point, was I wanted the reader to feel what these brothers were feeling as they were like slowly starving to death, trying to get home over a period of weeks. And then you take a book like Third Rule of Time Travel, which is a science fiction novel, which is about, it's a psychological thriller. And that book is like skating on thin ice. It's told very fast. There's very little depth to the prose. It's very much about action response. And because I wanted the reader to really feel like they were like kind of skipping along the top of this pond in a way, and moving fast and not really able to catch your breath. So I wrote those two books completely differently because of the way I wanted to tell those stories. And similarly with short fiction, I'll tell them different ways. We talked about Alter, Fail Safe, which was another kind of well-regarded story of mine that's being filmed right now by Sony. That was told from the perspective of a 13-year-old boy, and so very different, because I wanted the reader to sort of like feel like they were seeing things through his eyes, and kind of creating different kind of scares and different kind of dread. So every story is totally unique as to how I approach it. And I always have like a rationale for writing things the way I write them. But it's always ultimately because I want to tell what's the best way to tell this particular story. And so that's something I think about for sure. And like, not having the visuals, like I said, is a blessing to me, because I can sort of let the reader fill in a lot of those blanks. If I just give you the right cues, your brain will fill in the rest for me. And you'll probably do a better job than I ever would be able to do explaining it in prose.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Failsafe, because it was the other one that I really gravitated to. Here again, I'm personally very averse to giving spoilers or even like hinting at what a thing is getting at, because I feel especially a story like Failsafe, it really helps to kind of go in blind and to just follow every setup of Chekhov's gun that exists throughout it, because you make a couple of points about, oh, here's this one phenomenon, and then you immediately start playing with it within the story. And I just like that, because one, it's just interesting, clever writing, and two, it's also a neat way to deal with exposition, right? You were talking about what you show versus what you don't show. Because on one hand, you have a writer like, say, Clive Barker, who will tell you in great detail about the Cenobite standing up and the 19 tongues it had sitting across its lap go falling to the floor, and how it's blue and it smells vaguely like vanilla, and it's going to talk to you with a swollen tongue. But then on the other side of the horror spectrum, you've got Lovecraft, who tells you that it's a color from out of space, but it's a color you've never seen before, and it's not really a color. It's kind of like a color. Well, what the fuck does that mean, Philip? What are you getting at, Howard Philip Lovecraft? What are you trying to tell us?
I'm sensing a theme here with guys named Philip.
Maybe. But I think there's this interesting balance that has to be struck with any horror media, books especially, I think, literature, short stories, whatever, but also within movies as well. There is a certain level of how much of the snarling monster down the hall do I show you? Do I say, oh, it's down the hall and you get to see it kind of moving in chunks? Or do I do Cronenberg's The Fly and let you see the fly? Do I let you see the monster as it is? I mean, that's such a balancing act. And I don't know that there's any one that's more effective than the other. I like the Lovecraft thing. I like let the audience's brain do all of the work, let them kind of suss out what Nyarlathotep looks like. But then again, there is a value every so often to turning on the old blood geyser and letting the audience have it a little bit for a minute.
Yeah, and I think that's what I mean by cues. Like, for example, Failsafe, talking about Failsafe, the monster in Failsafe is never described.
No.
But there are cues. There are little hints, just enough to get your imagination working. get the reader's imagination working. Now, I'm very, very curious because when I go to Australia, I'm actually in a couple of weeks. I'm actually going to see this monster firsthand. So I'm very curious to see what they come up with. But that's an example where, I was more like, for me, it was scarier to let the reader imagine what this creature is. But to your point, I wrote another story. I was trying to rack my brain while you were talking, but to see I think the closest I can come is I wrote a story called Mother, and in Mother, it's kind of spoiler alert, but that's okay. In Mother, I'll be vague. In Mother, I describe a creature in much more detail. And because in that moment, to me, it was more important for the reader to understand exactly what the character in the story was dealing with, versus it's more like it kind of doesn't matter what the creature looks like or what the creature is capable of doing or what the creature is, how many limbs it has or how many eyes it has or how strong it is or how tall it is or what color the flesh is, all that kind of fun stuff. So in Mother, I really wanted the reader to have a very clear picture of what the monster looks like. So that because it made sense for that story. And so again, it goes back to what's the best thing for the story? What's the best way to present this story to a reader? So I do both. I definitely have. I was going to mention another writer. There's a wonderful writer called Ralph Robert Moore, who is a very visceral horror writer, and probably the most visceral horror writer I've ever read. And he just has a great way of describing things in a way that makes you feel them and feel the texture of a moment. And so I think again, for me, it always comes down to what serves, serving the story, what makes the story the best story it can be, because every story is different. And I think that's where maybe I have a bit of a different perspective than maybe a lot of writers, in that I always approach each story as its own thing, meaning I don't write the same way, story to story, book to book. All my books are very different. A lot of my stories are vastly different, and I think that's gotten me into some hot water with readers who will read, they'll read Third World Time Travel and then they'll read Gothic and they'll be like, wait, what? This isn't, I can't believe this is the same writer, not in a positive way. Although sometimes they're positive about it, to be fair. But so, I think it's about approaching each story and each situation and saying, what kind of experience I want to give to the reader, and how do I capitalize on that experience by the way I write the story.
Going back to Failsafe, because it was one that really hit me. And you brought up this notion of it's being told through the perspective of a child. Yeah. And there's a level of that also in Alter. And it was very, very striking because I think you do a really good job of kind of catching the amorphousness of childhood, of not really always, because you're not in full possession of the facts compared to the adults in the room. It can be very easy to lose track of things. First of all, there is this very Sigmund Freud part of me that wants to be like, Philip, you okay, man? But there's another part of me
I get that a lot.
I can imagine. But there's another part of me that thinks, obviously, of course, it's a choice. Obviously, you are deciding as a writer to want to use that voice. But why specifically, like with that story, you could have picked any of the other characters in the story. Not that there's a ton of characters in that story, but you could have picked any other character in that story and used their perspective. Why with some of the things you're writing do you choose children? Is it that they're not in full possession of the facts, or what is it that is so interesting about saying the horror of childhood? Makes it sound so much more dramatic than I mean, but the world of horror through the eyes of kids.
I think the horror of childhood works. Well, for Alter, we'll stick to these two stories for sake. So for Alter, it's told in third person, but it's told from the perspective of I think there's there's an adult perspective, and there's Gary's perspective, and then there's Tyler's the other kid. I think there's two kids and the mom. I think of the three perspectives I switch between, if memory serves. But it's third person, so it's omniscient narrative. So it's you're a little distant, you're a little more distant. You're seeing everything. But that story is about loss of innocence. That's what Alter thematically is about. It's about the loss of childhood innocence. It's just ratcheted up to 11.
Ratcheted up to 11. Yeah.
Yeah. And whereas Failsafe is about coming of age. It's about a boy who's about to turn 13 years old. And there's a couple of references in that story where they reference like, hey, you're going to be a man. When you turn 13, you're going to be a man, And so for Failsafe, I went first person perspective from the unnamed boy, because I wanted the reader to experience it through his eyes, because exactly what you're saying. I didn't want you to know everything. I wanted you to know what he knew. I wanted you to know that there's this room in the basement, and you're not really 100% sure what it is. I want you to feel the pride that he feels when he helps his dad. When his dad teaches him something that is horrific, right? His dad is teaching him how to hit the gas, right? And it's kind of like this. It's kind of like, but to the boy, it's like this wonderful, prideful moment where him and his dad are bonding, and they're. I wrote another story called My Father's Ashes, which is about a coming of age story about a young boy, and his father is a vampire, and his mother is human, and there's these flashbacks that the boy has where the father is teaching him how to hunt and how to eat his kill, as it were. And to the boy, it's like sitting around a campfire, like learning how to like whittle. But to the reader, you're like, this is horrible. Like, they're the guy showing him how to like where to find the vein and where to put your teeth. And so I think that's part of it too, is I wanted to kind of like, I wanted to get across that feeling of coming of age, where you are very much in the embodiment of a child, seeing things and feeling things the way a child would. Because then when you get to the end of that story, and I won't spoil anything, obviously, but then when it all kind of plays into the way the story, ends and rolls out, which is like, okay, now all of a sudden you are a man, and now you get to make the real decisions. And so that was kind of the theme of that story. So that's why I wrote those stories the way I did. I wrote, I think the most unique thing I've done from talking about perspectives. And I love talking about perspective. To the point where I've been at book signings. I've been talking about perspectives with other writers, and the moderator had to be like, "Can we stop? Because the readers don't care about this. It's very boring." But I will say that I wrote a book called "The Boys in the Valley," and that's told from 5 different POVs. All of them are third person, except for the main POV, which is first person. And there's 100% the definitive reason why I did that. The most surface reason being that I wanted that narrator, that perspective, to be the one that the reader attached to the most. Like, this is the voice that's going to guide you through this story, this horrific story. And then his other POVs are going to be kind of filling in the blanks. And there's a couple other reasons why I did it that I won't get into because it would be too spoilery. But yeah, so all that stuff, these are all tools. These are all things, just like, I think, an artist can employ different ways of painting, or a musician can employ different ways of recording music, and filmmakers obviously have different ways of, you guys mentioned cinematography and angles and all this different stuff. That's all. Writing is creative writing is the same way, at least for me, which is that I always am looking at different ways to play with prose and perspective and tone and pacing, to kind of create the best version of that story, or whatever story I'm telling.
So I'm glad you wrapped around to Failsafe having been picked up and it's either in production or beginning production here soon.
It's in production, right? Shooting right now.
I mean, first of all,
it's filming right now.
Congratulations. That's amazing. I'm sure you're probably way, way more thrilled about it than you can admit in an interview, but you've also been writing for screen for a while, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so help me through this, because I've never been fortunate enough to, 1, ever publish anything I've written, and 2, I've never had anything I've wanted to do turn into a movie. Maybe it would be a comedy of errors, probably. So thinking about it, like maybe just the first time that happened to you, what are you thinking? Someone says, "Hey, you wrote and published this thing. We think it could be good for the screen." Was that a dream come true? Were you terrified? Help us into your shoes there, if you can. Since you're so good at perspective, help us get there.
Yeah. It's a good question. I'm a pretty pragmatic guy. I don't get too up or down about stuff. I don't think any healthy writer can get too up or down about stuff. I think it's, but look, is it is it fun? Is it exciting? Yeah, 100%. It's always great. It's always fun to get something optioned or to have somebody show interest in your stories for adaptation. And so I would say that it was very exciting. You know, when A24, when the director and writer reached out. So the way what happened with Alter was there's a screenwriter who's a big fan of my work, who read the story, who then pitched it to a director, and then the writer and the director approached me through their manager, and I agreed to let them kind of run with it for a little bit, and then so they shopped it to around, and A24 picked it up, and then from there A24 optioned it from me, and then it was all kind of fast tracked from there. So in every situation, so I currently have 8 projects in different stages of development. All of them are really strong. They all have directors. They all have producers. Well, all but one has. One I'm writing a screenplay for. One's filmed. One's being filmed. A couple are in development. But so it's always case by case. And I think that for me, it's I don't know how to describe it in a way that is going to be helpful, but I think for me, it's like it's kind of almost it's very satisfying would be the way I guess I would put it. It's like that. It's very. I feel it's very humbling, first of all, and you feel very grateful, and it's like a compliment. It's like somebody gives you a gushing compliment. And you're kind of like, oh, well, thanks. Like, you're kind of that awkward, like, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I don't necessarily agree with you 100%. Like, I'm not that handsome, but in a way, it's kind of like when somebody options a movie or a story, you're kind of, for me anyway, I feel that sort of like, oh, shucks, that's, I'm abashed over here. But it's very satisfying, and I think it's I love it, and I want to do more of it. But really, the thing that's been the most exciting is that because for me, what it's turned into is sort of a second career in a way. Whereas now because I'm an executive producer now on all these projects, and I'm kind of more involved with the creative part of it. I'm reading the scripts, I'm giving notes, and going to set and all that kind of stuff. And for me, it's kind of like it's another way to be creative. It's another way to tell a story. It's another project to be involved in that's outside of like sitting at my desk alone every day writing. That's exciting. So I would say it's fun. Is it like, look, is it like if you get an option for a story, does it change your life? No, it doesn't. I mean, not really. It gives you rent money for a couple months. And maybe the story gets made and maybe it doesn't. I mean, the odds of it getting made are probably 1 in 100, if that. And so I think you have to be very realistic about it, very pragmatic about it. But if it goes the distance and you do get that movie going and there are casting people and you go to set and you see this thing you imagined in your mind and you see like, when I went to the Alter set, I walked into a sound stage that was, where there's these giant monster things, where I'm walking through them like they're like buildings. And then you go to the set and you meet these actors who are playing these people that came out of your head, and you see this, these events taking place that are all the things that you thought about sitting at your desk. And so it's really surreal. And that part of it is really, really fulfilling and it's really fun. So I think that's when you get where I think for me anyway, where it really hits me that, wow, this is like really, really cool. And so I guess that's where it becomes sort of like that part where it gets really exciting for me, or, is when it comes to fruition and you can actually see the physical things that are created and you have 100 people on a movie set working on this, scene where these people are saying the words that you wrote. It's incredibly, like I said, it's another word for me to describe it, but it's just incredibly fulfilling and incredibly humbling, because you just don't, if you're smart, how lucky you are to have those things happen. It's how fortunate you are. And so you're very grateful. Because, to get there, it takes a lot more than just hard work. It takes a lot of luck. It takes a lot of other people believing in you, believing in your work, a lot of other people working really hard to make it happen. So I don't know. For me, I think about it in this kind of bigger kind of like way that has less to do with like a knee-jerk excitement and more of like a long-term fulfillment. I guess would be. I'm sorry if that's a long-winded way to answer your question.
Absolutely, no, it's great.
Hearing you talk about the process and how you've interacted with others who are adapting your work, it sounds like you approach it from a very collaborative perspective, even though it might have started with you with an idea in your head with a story that you wrote. When it gets to the point where someone is putting a lot more time and effort behind it visually, that thing that we talked about earlier being a disadvantage, how do you approach a detail that you think is critical that someone else might have missed? Is there a plot point or something when someone else has put their visual or their audio or just the way they're framing that shot? Is there something that you've approached up until this point where you've said, that's not right? And how have you dealt with that up until this point?
So I think I was just talking to Josh Mallerman, my friend Josh, about this exact thing. And I think the way he put it was, if I write the song, someone else goes and sings it. And I think there's a lot of different metaphors that you could use. I think another metaphor that I use is I'm never going to like, if a painter wants to create a painting, if my story inspired a painter to paint, to create a painting, I wouldn't stand behind the painter and tell him how to hold the brush. I wouldn't tell him what colors to use. So for me, this is, when somebody options my story to go make a movie, I'm not thinking about how I would do it. I'm thinking about how can I support your vision that my work inspired? And that's the only real logical way to think about it. Because if you think about it now, so that said, I have read screenplays and I have given notes where I'm like, hey, you know what? This maybe this could be different, or maybe this could be more clear, or maybe this is not quite right. But I'm not controlling anything. I'm just giving input, and I'm trying to help them, create the vision that they want to create. And I think now the caveat, where the caveats come in is, so I think when you have a little bit more leverage, like let's say you've had a couple of things made, and now maybe when you're negotiating with a studio who's already optioned one or two of your stories, you have a little more like leverage. You can leverage for like input. You can leverage for, I wouldn't even call it control, but like, so as an executive producer on everything except for Alter, I very much want to be part of the process, not because I want any control over that process, but because I just creatively want to be part of it for like the fun of it, for like the, there's no other way to put it. I just want to let me be part of the team, in a way. And I think that's the thing it is very collaborative, to your point. And when I write a screenplay, whether it's based on my own work or not, you have to think of it as I am laying a foundation upon which other people will build something amazing. And you can't be sacred about the dialogue or the action or the scenes or the setting or the this or the that, because it's all going to change. It's all going to change. And so you're just trying to create like a foundation that they can build on. So for me, I think I mentioned earlier, every project is so different. It's case by case. And so if there is a writer director who want me to be more involved, who respect my opinion to the point where they want to show me visuals, or they want to show me VFX shots, or they want to show me the script, that's great for me, because that's fun for me, and I'm happy to be collaborative and help support them. There's some projects that I've done where I'm not involved at all, where it's like, where they're like, great, we'll let you know when the premiere is. So it's all different, but I'm not worried about. I will say that I'm not worried about, like I said, it's their vision, it's their project that I feel that I inspired. But I will say to answer your question somewhat directly, when you do sell a project, and there are creatives brought in, like a director and writers brought on board, you will almost always like a kickoff meeting or a creative meeting with those guys where they're going to pitch you their vision of what they think the movie will be. And I think there are elements there where you can say, well, these are the things that I think are important to the story. And, these are like the three core things that I would not want you to lose in an adaptation. Where there's this relationship that I think is core to the story, or there's this theme that is core to the story. So that stuff is talked about and discussed. Now, whether they ignore me and do whatever they're going to do, that's up to them. But I do have those conversations with the writers and with the director, and I've had them multiple times over all these projects. So you do get that input. But unless I'm directing the movie, I'm not going to worry about what the director is doing. I'm going to let the director do what the director wants to do. There's a movie where I am writing the screenplay, so I'm working a little bit more with the vision, because it's kind of one step closer to that final product with the screenwriter and the source material guy. So in that sense, in that project, I'm much more involved, obviously, because I'm working directly hand in hand with the director to say, like, okay, well, how do we want to construct this movie? Beat for beat, scene for scene. So that, so the level of involvement varies greatly project by project, but that's the long-winded answer to your question.
So kind of moving on to the upcoming film Failsafe. So this movie, when I was reading it, God, I don't remember which news rag I was reading where I saw the announcement about it, but immediately what jumped off the page to me is, one, there's some names behind this. Like, the cast is fairly good. And the director, I mean, I'm sure you can detail this to the audience here in just a moment, but this is a big deal. Every adaptation of everything you write is going to end up being a big deal. No doubt. I mean, that's true, I think, for everybody, but there's got to be a point, like, were you looking at the details of this upcoming production and went, oh, holy crap, this is amazing? Or was it just, cool, another one of my pieces is going a direction I want it to go?
Yeah. So it's been an interesting evolution. So it's called Skeletons now. It was originally, they stuck with Failsafe for a while, and it was originally optioned by Universal, and Bad Robot was attached as producer, and Brian Duffield was attached to write and direct. And then it kind of like that option sort of ran out, and there were some behind the scenes things going on they're above my pay grade. And then it got picked up by Film Nation, and that was when then Brian had to go make Whalefall for 20th Century, and so that's when they brought in JT Molnar, and I was really bummed out when I found out that Brian was not going to direct, because he and I have become friends, and I was really excited about him directing it, and I think he was really excited about directing it. And I think we're both mutually bummed out about how the schedule ended up working out, but it just was the way it was. So, but then when they brought in JT Molnar, I was like, holy cow! Like, I'm a big fan of Strange Darling. That's an exciting name to me. And then, and I'm not sure the order of which it all happened. Then, like, the producer called me one day and said, "Great news! We just got Brie Larson," and I'm like, to play the lead, and I'm like, Oscar winner, Brie Larson, Marvel, Super Captain Marvel's Brie Larson, and which is like, and that's, I think, when I say the whole idea, like, you can't get, because it's all like, it's amazing. Obviously, it's amazing. Obviously, never in a million years could I have imagined J.J. Abrams producing a movie of mine starring Brie Larson and Kyle Gallner and directed by J.T. Molnar, and and of course not. And Sony it's going to be the biggest sale at the European film market. Sony pays $25 million for worldwide rights. But these are all things that just, you're very, I don't know, God, I wish, I feel like it sounds like I'm not being truthful, but I am, which is, I just can't help, I just feel grateful. I'm just grateful for it all. I'm like, this is so great. Like, I'm so focused on my next project. I have so much to do. I'm like, I have like 3 deadlines right now. And I'm just kind of like, I've got this. I'm kind of like, it's awesome. And now I got to get back to writing this next story. And this is kind of the way my mind works. And, but yeah, it's very cool. And I think when Brie was attached, and then Kyle Gallner was attached, I did get really excited when Kyle Gallner was attached, because I loved him in Strange Darling. And I was like, that guy's going to be a star. And so I thought he was just perfect for the role. And it just got me really kind of, extra excited about the whole thing. And so, yeah, stuff like that is amazing. But I think for me, I think because of the life I've led, I'm an older guy. I've had a lot of jobs. I've had a lot of different careers. I've had a lot of different lives. I've had a lot of bad things happen to me. I've had a lot of good things happen to me. And I think you get sort of a macro perspective on things where you're like, of course, this is amazing. But in the big picture, it's one thing kind of out of a series of events of my life and out of many lives. And we are a speck of blue in the vast universe, not to be a nihilist, but I just think, it's hard, it's just my brain is always thinking kind of in a very expansive way. And I think so. These unique things that happen are incredible and awesome. But I am always thinking about what else can I do and what can I do next? What would be the next fun idea to start writing about and focusing on? And so anyway, it's all I can say is it's cool. It's great. I'm super excited. And I think that every project will have its own unique, cool thing or great thing that will make it exciting and that will make it unique and interesting. Even if it's a $5 million indie movie, maybe I get to be more involved because it's smaller and I get to really have a hand in crafting it. And that would be exciting. That would be more exciting to me than an A-list star being in a $50 million movie. But then maybe I had that experience too, which is its own kind of fulfilling thing. So yeah. So it's all very cool. And I wish I had a better answer for you.
I've got to level with you, man. There are way worse problems you could have right about now.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by, that's why I keep coming back to being grateful. I think that's my number one takeaway with any of this stuff. I mean, I'm grateful that I can write novels. I'm grateful that I have this weird, thing in my head that allows me to write characters and write scenes and use prose in a way that tells a good story. I'm grateful that there's publishers out there who want to publish my work. And I'm grateful that there's studios and producers and who want to take those stories and transform them into something else. So it's all very humbling and all I can do is keep my nose to the grindstone and keep writing and keep coming up with ideas so that I can continue to do what I love to do and keep having these opportunities and keep having these experiences.
I am not a person who likes a wham line. I am not a person who wants to strike it home with a good punchline, but I've got to level with you, Philip. I don't know of a better way to kind of come around to the end of an interview. I don't know. It clearly shows why you're the professional writer and I'm the podcaster. All those jokes aside, though, I mean, your point about gratitude is especially interesting because I find that when I was a much younger person, 300 years ago, I always was very, it's a running joke of mine. I like joking that I'm an old man, even though I'm really not. My knees tell me I
really am an old man. I can.
Okay, fair enough. My knees tell me a different story, but that's another story altogether. There is this thing that I always come back to about what we do here with our show is that I'm just happy that people listen. I'm just happy that I can send a message at random to an author and say, hey, we're doing this thing. Are you interested? Because, believe me, I've swung a few times and totally missed. I have asked people if they'd be interested and got absolutely nothing. And listen, no one is required. I don't hold that against anybody. I don't hold grudges really just as a rule. Big shock for a lot of people I know who are going to say, yeah, you do, man. But anyway, but no, when it comes right down to it, I'm just grateful that I can get people to listen and that I can get people to come on and talk about the incredibly cool projects they're up to. And I think it's so great. And I also really like your point about, it could be this massive thing with Oscar winners and J.J. Abrams and all that, but it can be a small indie project too. I mean, I think in the horror world, especially, there's room for both and a necessity for both. And I'm an indie horror guy. That's where I feel like my heart will always be. But I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you I went to the theater like 2 weeks ago and saw The Backrooms and absolutely adored it. I thought it was great. One of my favorite horror movie experiences of all time was when The Exorcist was re-released in 2001-ish, 2000.
Sounds about right.
And sitting in a room full of people who clearly had never seen The Exorcist before and watching them get just absolutely steamrolled by that movie was a really good time. I just feel fortunate that we live in a time and place where both of those things can exist kind of simultaneously and that there is such an audience for it, and for kind of the ancillary world of it too. I mean, people say print is dead, but you've made a pretty successful career out of writing, so very clearly print is not, in fact, fully dead anyway.
No, I don't think print is dead. If anything, it's kind of like it's sort of like books have kind of become a little bit like locusts,
Okay.
eating the field in a way. And, and I saw a statistic earlier where they showed the increase in and I'm not going to go on an anti-AI rant.
You're more than welcome to, actually.
But where they show the increase on ebooks that are on Amazon,
mm-hmm.
and they showed how it had doubled basically in the last few months, I think it was, because of all the AI books that are being produced and shoved out there. And so I know, and then I look at guys like Daniel Kraus, who is such an artist and who just won the Pulitzer Prize for a horror novel for Angel Down. And I feel like it's getting a bit cloudy, a bit, in the literary world. There's so much going on right now, and there's so much noise that I think for a lot of readers, it's hard to kind of like know where to look, or what to pick up or what to read. So I think that's a challenge right now. I don't think, that's why when you said print is dead, it made me think like, if anything, we need less of it. But I think that, I do think that there's going to be, again, I was just talking to a friend of mine about this, a writer, and he was like, there's going to be a reckoning, I think, where there will be a strong wind that will blow away a lot of this chaff. And it'll be interesting to see what remains standing. And, so I wish that, I'll just say this about AI. I wish that creative people wouldn't use it. I wish they would use it for, to cure cancer and to make a cleaner environment, and use it for science and medicine and things that will benefit humanity versus like, lazy people who just, want to do something the easy way, and create something that is, should never have been, in some inferior product that has no heart and no soul, is something that I don't think we need as a society right now or ever.
I've heard it compared, and I think what you said at the end there is absolutely correct. It's a tool, and if it was being used for what it's good at, which at the end of the day is numbers, there might be some value there. But talking about time and place, a film that came out recently, we saw Jitters, where Daniel Jordan plays what you think is just another psychotic clown character looking at the cover of the film, but the plot of that film is directly in the direction of, no, the bad guy is the AI. And that's not the first film to do something like that, but very time and place, very much here is a way to use today to tell something horrific that might make you think about what you do tomorrow. Is there a sweet spot in time and place where you think there's always horror here? Horror has changed over time. Stories have changed over time and how they're shown, where a scary movie in the 40s and the 50s might just be very dark lighting and a shadow moving from right to left, and you cut to another scene, versus something like Grindhouse films in the 70s or Hostel in the early 2000s, where it became, look how gross this is. Is there a spot in horror where, even just within writing, where you point to that and say, that's not going to change. That's always going to be scary. I don't want to call it safe because we're talking about horror, but that's going to be something that can't really be messed up, no matter how many new tools we get.
I think if I'm understanding your question, if I answer it incorrectly, let me know if I'm off the mark. But I think for me, are you talking about like in storytelling, like what's evergreen when it comes to telling horror stories? Is that kind of what you mean?
Either in storytelling itself or the characters, the premise, whether that's age of the characters or, let's say, supernatural. You're always going to be able to tell a werewolf story or a vampire story. Those things you can't really mess with those.
I'm not a big fan of the recycled tropes, but for me, I try not to I try not to write anything that is contemporary. And what I mean by, for me, because I find that for talking about a sweet spot, and I think Quentin Tarantino actually said this once, and he said, I never want to set a story. I never want to set a story during the age of cell phones. I always want to set a story, or the age of the internet. I always want to set a story before the internet, before cell phones. And I think I'm kind of the same way. I think I think if I were to go through all of my stories and all of my novels, even my quote unquote contemporary novels, like A Child Alone with Strangers, which is set in the early 90s. Boys in the Valley is set in 1905. Third Rule of Time Travel is actually set 20 years in the future. And I think for me, I think what I like to do, the reason I purposely do that, whereas I'm not going to write, so I'll never write a story about, for example, well, that's not true. I was about to say I'll never write a story about AI, but I actually did write a story. I wrote a story called Murder by Proxy, which is about whatchamacallit, an Alexa type robot that murders people by using sound frequencies. And so, but I like to create a story world for the reader. I like to take the reader away from real life. I like to take a reader away from the headlines, away from the politics of the day, the socio-political climate of today, whatever that day is, when they read it, and just sort of say, like, here, I'm creating this sort of like, I'm taking you to this different world, this story world, where we're gonna sit down and I'm gonna tell you this story, and it's not gonna be anything that's going to remind you of what you have to do when you put this book down. It's not going to remind you of anything that you read in the paper this morning. It's going to be something that's completely separate from that. It's going to be this, we're going to be sitting around a campfire, sitting by a big fireplace, and I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you a story, and that escapism of it all. And so for me, I think, and this is kind of what hopefully I'm answering your question correctly, but for me, it's like, I'd like to take people away from the real world. I think there's a lot of books out there that like to batter you to death with the real world. I'm not that guy. I'm more of an escapism kind of storyteller. And I think that's for better or for worse. I think there are a lot of writers who feel like as fiction writers, we need to, be banging the drum, and we need to be reminding people of all the horrible things that are going on in the world. And I'm not really, I think there's enough reminders. I think there's enough information out there on all the things that are bad about the world. And I like to kind of treat my stories as more like separate outside of those things. So I think, those are, for me, that's the kind of stuff that I think will always be timeless. If you're creating a timeless story, you're creating something you could read today, or you could read hopefully 50 years from now, and it would still have that like feeling of it could have happened. I don't know, that feeling of it wouldn't have mattered when you read it. It still has that same energy. So again, I don't know if that's answering your question correctly, but that's kind of, and there are the evergreen tropes and those kind of things as well. I don't think any that's ever in danger of going away. I think there's always going to be different voices and different ways of telling things and different perspectives. And everyone's going to have like a different werewolf story or a different vampire story or a different zombie story. But I think if you are talking about showing the darkness of the human heart and the shadowy corners of the human mind, those are evergreen themes too, right?
Absolutely.
Coming of age is always good. Coming of age is an evergreen theme. And I think I like to explore those kind of things more than I do the more the monsters and stuff like that. But because those are things, I think you actually mentioned it earlier in our conversation, those are things that never go away. They're never going to change. You're always going to have evil. You're always going to have murder. You're always going to have, good people making bad decisions. You're always going to have children losing innocence. You're always going to have these things that are always going to be part of us as humans. And I think those are the things that I really like exploring. And I like turning that stone over and looking at the underbelly of what's wiggling around underneath, the human heart, because there's some dark shit down there.
I don't know of a more Fright Lab way to end an interview. You've pinned it all down, my man. You truly have. So with all of that said, let's round out with the obvious questions. Number one, if someone's interested in your work, and I hope to God, siblings, you're wanting to go check out his work. If someone's interested in your work, where can they go to find what you're up to these days?
Obviously any retailer, book retailer has my books. But the best resource is my website, which is pfracassi.com, because that's got all my books, all my stories, all my bio, all my news and events, all that stuff's up there. So that's the best resource. And I'm also on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Threads and Blue Sky. So I'm easily accessible through all of those platforms.
All right. And so the new film, I believe it's titled Skeletons is the working title right now.
Yes, that is the working title right now at this moment.
It may change, but
it's probably going to change. Yeah.
It is in production as we speak. Has there been any conversation about when that will be in theaters or any idea of a rough schedule for that sort of thing?
No, I don't think so. Alter. I'm hoping Alter will come out next year in 2027. Okay. But no, I don't know anything about a release date yet for Skeletons. Unfortunately, I know that they're in principal photography as we speak, and will be for probably another month or so, and then they'll go into post and all that good stuff. But hopefully, I'm hoping next year. Or worst case 2028. That's the hope. Yeah.
Well, then I'll tell you what. If it's okay with you, when either or both of those hit the theater, and we can actually have a conversation about them as film, can we have you back on to have that conversation?
Yeah, of course. I would love that.
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Joe, do you have anything else you'd like to ask our long-suffering guest?
One of the things we always like to ask, not just ourselves, but when we're meeting someone for the first time talking about horror movies, we always try to set a stage to not define, but present horror in a way that's unique to the individual. So one of the questions I like to ask everyone is, if this was a Friday night and we were getting together for the first time, what film would you bring for everyone to sit and enjoy with their beverage of choice? And I think this time, Lucas, I want to ask Philip, what film has stood out to you as horrifying that was not presented as a horror film? Is there a terrifying concept film out there that this is not supposed to be a horror movie, but this is shocking by the time it's over?
Okay, well, the first question is a little easier than the second question, because the first question I would bring, well, it's a tie. I'd bring over two movies. I'd bring The Thing.
Okay.
Which one?
Carpenter's
The Thing. The actual thing.
The Thing.
Okay.
John Carpenter's The Thing.
Absolutely.
And which one? And
nobody needed to know, but somebody out there was like, he didn't say which one. He couldn't possibly mean the new one. No, he didn't mean the new one.
The 2011 sequel. No, John Carpenter's The Thing, I believe 1982, right? And what is arguably my favorite movie of all time, which is Aliens.
Ooh, okay. All right. That's I don't know that I've done that double feature, but that's a fun one. Okay. All right. I like it.
Yeah, I'm a big Aliens guy. I like Alien, but Jim Cameron's sequel Aliens is one of my is probably my all-time favorite movie. Then The Thing, depending on the day and my mood, then The Thing are interchangeable. With Jaws a close third.
Maybe on another day we can talk about how the whole action movie horror concept is actually Cameron's fault, because I do think between all of that and Terminator, it's 100% his fault. The reason you go to a theater to see an action movie that is presented as a scary movie. I do think if he didn't start it, he laid the finalized blueprint that everybody ripped off for 20 years.
I mean, I preach this all the time. I tell people, I don't think you fully realize how many things are in Aliens that have been replicated and duplicated and stolen, and that you now think was original because you don't understand that, no, it all happened in Aliens first. If I had a T-shirt that I could put anything on, it would be like Aliens did it first. But that's put anything on. But which is a really weird T-shirt to be wearing around. But because there's a lot of different ways that could go. But
God, I didn't even think about that. That's awful.
Well, you're welcome. See, I didn't have to actually say it. I just could kind of infer it. And now you're
this man is a professional.
Our imaginations did the work on that one. Absolutely.
Welcome to creative writing. But the other question is a really good question. And I'm thinking of a movie that You know what? Okay, I think I actually have an answer, which is it's definitely not a horror movie, for some reason, Empire of the Sun always struck me as being like it's incredibly dark, really upsetting film, and it's presented as like I don't even know, historical drama, right? But Empire, and I never read the novel actually, but I did see the movie, and yeah, Empire of the Sun for some reason when I saw that movie I was really depressed. I was really bummed out, and it was pretty. And I thought it was really horrifying, and it kind of easy. I'm not going to go full Schindler's List because that's those, the horrors of war. But there's something. They're both Spielberg, but there's something about the tone of Empire of the Sun that just it feels like that movie just exudes dread from beginning to end. And so I'll tell my that's the best answer I can come up with. But I think that's the movie that popped in my head is like a movie that wasn't a horror, but like made me feel like I just watched like a really grim horror movie.
That's an extremely good answer. I've never considered Empire of the Sun that way. I mean, obviously, anything wartime is or historical is the easy answer. My example of that is always The Wicker Man, where Christopher Lee said it best.
Think it's a horror movie?
It is not a horror movie. It is a running.
I don't know about that.
I think it's a horror movie. Second,
full horror.
I think it's a horror.
I think it's full horror.
It's definitely full horror. I will absolutely agree with you there. I think it's a full horror. Simultaneously, it's also the world's weirdest musical. It's the thing no one wants to talk about is that it's actually also a musical until like the last 35 minutes. And I say it. This is one of my favorite films, like easily top 10 favorite films. The original Wicker Man.
Now, which Wicker Man are we talking about? Are we talking about the Nicolas Cage Wicker Man?
Absolutely not. That is a drunken comedy.
Okay, we had that coming. All right, admittedly, we had that coming.
People want to know.
I've got to say, you said like war movies almost feel like a cheap shot, but there's one movie that I love to talk about, and the movie is Come and See. It is a Russian horror film, came out in the 1970s-ish. Someone will fact check me, I'm sure. It talks very candidly about what specifically the people of Belarus went through during World War II at the hands of the Nazi invasion. And without ever really expressly saying this is a horror film, it just pummels you. It is just an absolutely brutal film. And it's the rare type of war film that does not glorify war at all. And it just kind of shows you, here it is.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I actually have a better answer than my Empire of the Sun answer.
Okay.
I have two more. I'm just gonna throw these out. We don't have to rank them.
This is a weekend now.
Das Boot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
Right. All 3.5 hours of it.
Yeah.
I don't mind an epic.
Theater, and that was brutal. That was a brutal film to watch in the theater. It was brilliant. But talk about a horror. But you know what movie I think is, if I were to re-answer the movie that wasn't horror but that is a horror movie, Mommy Dearest.
Oh no!
Wow.
Oh, I need to leave now.
Oh God! I'm so
no more wire hangers.
I am so ashamed of myself for not having thought of that. That is so. This will not surprise you in the slightest.
And I've seen that movie like 10 times. As a kid, I used to watch HBO like 24/7, and that was always on. It was always in rotation on HBO.
My mom and I have a running joke about Mommy Dearest. Like it's kind of the inside family joke is. We both just love the movie. We both love the book.
Yeah, it's great.
But it is also so dark to have that running joke with your mom, to have that as the thing. Like and the funny thing is even now, if I go to her house and I go to hang up my coat in the closet, there will be no wire hangers in there.
Yeah. The wire hanger thing is like, and there's this great scene in that movie where she takes over like Pepsi.
Oh, don't fuck with me, fellas. This is not my first rodeo.
That scene is like, what is happening right now? And no, that is like that if there was ever a movie that embodied, I think, what I strive to do with a lot of my work, I think Mommy Dearest is probably pretty close. I mean, that vibe of like this daughter telling about, who's, and she's like at the very end, they're like, well, I guess she got the last word. She's like, I guess she got the last word again. And then she's like, did she? And she's like the whole like hint thing that like, I'm about to write a book that's going to blow this whole thing wide open. And I mean, what a genius movie, and what a terrifying performance. And yeah, but talk about a horror movie that's not a horror movie. That's,
Yeah. Okay. I think you won this round, sir. I believe you won this round. All right. So
I don't know. By the way, I have no idea why I thought of it, but it popped in my head when you were talking.
So with that, my man, I know you have plans, you have things you need to do tonight. We will let you go. Philip Fracassi, thank you so much for coming on the Fright Lab. We really appreciate it. We will leave it there for tonight. Friends, family, we really appreciate you tuning in, and we will talk to you all again very soon.
That's Fright Lab for you.
The one that you've been calling. Here comes the one that you've been waiting for. Look down, all of the things are falling at your feet. And when you hear the voice that's calling,